Bibles to Revelation chapter 17. Where we're at now is we had just finished the bowl judgments in chapter 16, and then there's a little interlude here where chapter 17 and 18 are going to be talking about Babylon, Babylon being like the spiritual religious Babylon, and then there's the commercial Babylon. The religious spiritual Babylon will be talked about in 17, and in 18 we'll talk about commercial Babylon. So once we get there, we'll understand it more and more. But so it's kind of like a little interlude, and then so 16, if you were going to just read it, 16 would move right into 19 if we didn't have this little interlude. We're going to talk about Babylon and some pretty judgment stuff. So if anybody needs a Bible, you can get one in your hands. Just lift your hand, and we'll get one to you, so you can follow along. If you don't have one, you better trust that mine's a true translation. It's New American. It's not as, so I won't say anything else. But Babylon, when we talk about just by way of just talking about Babylon, it's mentioned like 300 plus times in the Bible. And I can't remember. I think it's almost 40 times in the book of Revelation. But it's really the second most city spoken of in the Bible outside Jerusalem. So there's something about Babylon that we're to know, okay? And I want to kind of give us a little entry into this. Verse 17 of 16, I'm just going to read up until 17. And the seventh angel poured out his bowl upon the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne saying, "It is done." And there were flashes of lightning and sounds of peals of thunder, and there was a great earthquake, such as there had not been since man came upon the earth. And so great an earthquake, it was so mighty that the great city was split into three parts. That would be Jerusalem, and the cities of nations fell. And Babylon the great was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath. Every island fled away, the mountains were not found. Huge, and we talked about huge hailstones weighing, like these guys are big boys, 100 pounds apiece, so you're not going to avoid that. About 100 pounds each came down from heaven upon men, and men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, because the plague was extremely severe. Then, there's 17 and 18, and we'll pick up again, if you're going to kind of go in chronological order, you'll pick up in 19, and you'll hear this in verse 1. And these things I heard, as it were, a loud voice of a great multitude in heaven, saying, "Hallelujah, salvation and glory belong to our God and power, because his judgments are true and righteous, for he has judged the great harlot who is corrupting the earth with her immorality, and he avenged the blood of his bondservants." So 19 is kind of steps into some hallelujahs and some really positive stuff. But so right now I want to just focus in on 17, and we're going to look at religious or spiritual Babylon. And let me read to you the first 5 verses. And one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here, and I will show you the judgment of the great the great harlot who sits on many waters. And when the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality, and those who dwell on the earth were made drunk with the wine of her immorality. And he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having her hand and having in her hand a gold cup of abominations and the unclean things of her immorality. And upon her forehead a name was written, a mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. So, beginning this, who is this great harlot? And we thank you so much. So who is the great harlot? Well, she's actually mentioned here in Revelation chapter 17 by the woman on the beast or her like 13 times. So it's important, but she symbolizes a few things. But one thing she symbolizes is it's a standing symbol for idolatry, and this is what she's standing for. But women are really symbolic in the Bible. When you look at women, they're symbolic of religion, like Revelation 20 or 2:20, Jezebel. She was a false religion. The Queen of Kingdoms in Isaiah chapter 47.5 or .5. Basically, the Queen of Kingdoms is another religious woman. The Queen, great harlot, Revelation 19:2, and she shall be judged. And then we see the bride of Christ, which is a woman, and that depicts the church. And then the wife is talked about in the Old Testament is Israel. So women symbolize a lot of times religion. So we're going to look at that. But the harlotry is a standing symbol of idolatry. It's like the ultimate of sin, I guess you would say, in some aspect. Jeremiah 3:6, you guys, if you want to turn there, I don't think we have anybody back on it. But Jeremiah 3:6. And then the Lord said to me in the days of Josiah the king, have you seen what faithless Israel did? She went up on every high hill and under every green tree, and she was a harlot there. So this is when Israel was playing the harlot. They were in the idol worship at that time, and this is prior to them getting taken into bondage by Assyria and Babylon. Verse 8, I saw that for the adulterers of faithless Israel, I had sent her away and given her the writ of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah did not fear, but she went and was an harlot also. So Israel and Judah played the harlot prior to their captivity going into Babylon for 70 years. And by the way, after that 70 years, they didn't ever do much. I mean, idolatry was pretty much cured. And when they got released from Babylon. And then 9, and it came about because of the lightness of her harlotry, that she polluted the land and committed adultery with stones and trees. So we see that the harlot is being unfaithful to God. It has immorality mixed in with it, but anything you worship outside God will be called, I've heard it called a master passion. And let me ask you, what is the master passion of your life this morning? What is it that really floats your boat, I guess you could say? What is it that you think about and your mind is upon? That would be the master passion of your life. And you know what? You know how we keep Christ as the master passion of our life? Really, when you read His Word, it becomes alive and active inside of you, and Christ becomes number one. And God doesn't play second fiddle to anybody. How many of you know that? He's a jealous God, and He loves you, and He wants to be number one. And so, and I think about Ezekiel, and this is a scathing rebuke. And I do want to read this because God really kind of gives it to Israel here. And it's pretty sobering, if you will, if you read it. Okay, it's Ezekiel 16:30 through 40. I'll just read it to you. You don't have to turn it if you don't want to. How languishing is your heart, declares the Lord, while you do all these things, the actions of a bold-faced harlot. I mean, just call him bold-faced harlot. And when you build your shrine at the beginning of every street, and you made your high place on every square, and disdaining money, you were like a harlot. So again, I hope you get the idea that God isn't really, He doesn't like the harlotry of Babylon. So it's really just like false religion. And really this woman on the beast is the unholy counterpart to the bride of Christ, if you will. Mother of all false religions. Now, Babylon, that's where a lot of occultish stuff began. Really, when Babylon was the capital of sin and false religion, if you will. So where Hinduism, Buddhism, existentialism, Marxism, mysticism, wokeism, emotionalism, progressivism, social action. I mean, so this is where we get that false religion comes from the Babylonian Empire at that time. I look at it today, and I look at the progressive church, and I guess that's the way we need to label it. The progressive church, really, which would be, and some people call it the woke church, but the progressive church definitely is delving in false religion. And Babylon, the spirit of Babylon, I believe, is upon some parts of the church today. But there's a watered down gospel going on. They're watering down the gospel, and it's like, hey, if you just say a prayer and ask Jesus in your heart, everything will be fine. And we do believe that. We believe saying a prayer, coming forward, but it's not just coming forward and saying a prayer and say, man, I'm sealed, I'm signed, sealed, and delivered. There's much more to it. There's a cross to it, and I hear a lot about a crossless gospel, a different Jesus. And today you got to ask, when people are saying, well, I'm a follower of Jesus, you have to ask, which Jesus are you talking about? There was a day you didn't have to ask that. You knew exactly what he was, who he was. But now, guys, there's so many Christ and different Christs being preached. It's kind of like a false faith, if you will. But it was interesting because I think someone had done a little bit of a study on this. They did. And it seemed like people who got saved in the seeker-sensitive generation, who were never really discipled, the seeker-sensitive church, Bill Hybel had started that, and basically, I don't know if you knew that, but he has renounced that style of ministry, and he doesn't believe it works, and it doesn't have a lot of discipleship in with it. But those who got saved in that generation, which would be sort of like, what would it be, Gen X and millennial, they were never discipled. They just went to church. And those are the ones that seem to be falling prey to this Babylon spirit that's being built up for the day of tribulation. But they never really got discipled. They were never solid in the Lord. And if you've not been discipled, or if you've not walked with someone that you have like a mentor, a discipler, or whatever, it's difficult to walk by yourself. I tell everybody, you ought to have a Paul and you ought to have a Timothy. Who is your Paul? Who's the one that you're being accountable to, that is more mature in the Lord than you and is going to help you out? And who is your Timothy? Who are you pouring your life into? Paul said it in 2 Timothy 2:2 that these things I've given you, Timothy, so that you'll be able to give to other faithful men, who will be able to give to other faithful men. So the whole idea of discipleship is not just discipling one person, but you're discipling that person so they can go and disciple someone. But I'm seeing that a lot of those people that didn't get discipled in that generation, it seems like they fall prey to this false progressive Christianity that's going on. And that's not the message. But I want to see that it's tying in. How does it tie in today? And I see it. I see that spirit entering into quote, quote, Christianity. But Mystery Babylon. So let's just begin with verse 1 and kind of comb this out. And one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here, and I shall show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters." So we talked about the harlot, but sits on many waters, that's many nations. In other words, this false religion is going to influence all kinds of nations, the whole world outside those written in the Lamb's Book of Life will be deceived during this time. And with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality, and those who dwell on the earth who were made drunk with the wine of her immorality. I looked at that and thought, how does that fit today? I don't know if you guys have heard, you probably have, but there's a little island called Little St. James Island, and it's a man by the name of Jeffrey Epstein had all kinds of immorality, and they call it the island of sin or the island of pedophilia. And I thought, all the leaders of the world, kings and princes and rich people, would go to that island, and they would fall prey to, that made drunk with the wine of her immorality. And it said many kings went there. Guys, it seems like right now we're in that spot where God is saying, this is what's happening. I'm getting you ready to take you home, and there's going to be 7 years of tribulation. And so there's two ways we can look at it, like, oh my gosh, really? Or like, thank God, really, I'm ready to go. And I tell you, I think God is just showing us what's happening in the world is just a prelude of what they're going to see in the tribulation. And that, again, that they were drunk with the wine of her immorality. A lot of people think the woman on the beast here is Rome. And David Hunt wrote a book called Woman Rides the Beast. And a lot of people, and so there's a lot of different ideas. Guys, I studied the best I can, and I got some conclusions, but I can't tell you dogmatically what I see all the way through this, other than the great harlot is immoral. And immorality is going to, and really sexual sin and all that, and idolatry is going to be a big part of the falling away of the church in the last days. So, and he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast. Now, the beast here, back in the day, they called Caesar Nero the beast. I don't know if you knew that. But she saw a woman who was sitting on the beast full of blasphemous names and having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, back in the day, I guess prostitutes would wear a band around their head, and they would put their name in front of it. So here, this harlot here is walking around with, and actually we'll look at this, and it says the woman was clothed with purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup of abominations and the unclean things from her immorality. And upon her forehead a name was written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. Now mine says mystery, Babylon the Great. Some of your translations will say the mystery at Babylon the Great. I think it reads better than just mystery, then quotes Babylon the Great. Because Babylon the Great, especially if it's a mystery, basically it's not named so we don't get it confused with some geographical location. Babylon is a movement, it's a spirit, it's so you can't just say it's back in the day, back where Babylon was. Babylon cannot be confined to any one historical manifestation in the past or the future. It's the spirit of Babylon. And there was an actual Babylon, and we'll get into that. It did begin with a guy by the name of Nimrod who built the Tower of Babel. But any place that is characterized by false religion is a Babylon. Now, just give you a little history of what Babylon is. Babylon, turn with me to Genesis chapter 11. Hold your finger. I'm just going to read 10, 8, and 9 really quick before we get there. Now Cush became the father of Nimrod, and he became a mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it was said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. So really Nimrod, this guy is the great-grandchild of Noah. Okay, and Cush, his dad, was the grandson. Now, I say he was a mighty hunter, and the word is not like the guy went out and hunt, deer or hunt birds, but he was a hunter for souls. And so this guy was not really a good guy for sure. Let me read 11 and 1 and following. Now, the whole earth used the same language and the same words. So all the earth at this time, there's no other languages but just one, which is interesting. And it came about as they journeyed east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks, burn them thoroughly." And they used brick for stone, and they used tar for mortar. So they're going to make this big tower. It's called a ziggurat. And basically what they are is they're like a tower that kind of tapers up to the top, and there's a ladder around it. It can be actually up to 7 or 60 stories high. a ziggurat. And they would have the actual zodiac sign at the very top, because they thought if they get closer to the heavens, they can be like God. And Nimrod, for whatever reason, he thought he was going to climb to the top of it, take his bow, eye out God, and give him an arrow, and he's going to take over heaven. He's not going to do that. But anyway, the guy was sort of, touched, I guess you could say. And they, in verse 4, and they said, come up, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower whose top will reach into heaven. So that was the whole idea, is to reach up into heaven and to become like God. And lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. So they were in real unity. I mean, just think about it. With one language, they were unified. And that sounds familiar. If you're following anything about what's happening in our world, globalism, that's the big call. We need to have unity. And we need to have all. That's why they're going to go for a one world government. That's why they're going to go for a one world money system, because that unifies everybody. And so this is a type of what's going on, what we're seeing today. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of man had built. Now, I don't know why he said he had to come down, because God's omnipresent. He already knew he already knew it was being done, but God dumbs down the word for us so we can understand it. He came down and he looked and he saw that they were building a tower. And the Lord said, behold, they are one people. Now, again, listen to what he's saying. They are one people. Even evil people know that unity is essential to seeing anything get done. That's why, guys, we as believers need to be unified. Now, we may not believe all the same things doctrinally. There's some things that are really, that we major in the majors and minor in the minors, guys. But I think that we need to pull our hearts together and be one as we fight the enemy. And they all have the same language, and this is what they began to do. And now nothing which they purpose to do will be impossible for them. So he's saying, hey, listen, if these guys keep going the way they are, they could do some major damage to the earth. There's not like they're going to come and be like God, but they could do so. And I think today it almost seems like the Tower of Babel today is AI. And because they're developing AI very, very fast, and they're really afraid what's happening with AI. and so they're building this tower, and God's saying, man, if they get this tower up, it's not just because of the tower, but look what they can do, mankind can do. Let us go down. And we need to confuse them. But it's interesting that we're seeing that kind of happening in our world today. Verse 7, let us go down, and that speaks of the Trinity, us, go down, and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And the Lord scattered them abroad for their over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore, its name was called Babel. And the reason it's called Babel, Bab is the Hebrew word for gate, and then El is like the word for God. El, like El Elyon, El Shaddai. So this is God's gate. So this is what they're saying. We're going to make a gate to God, and we're going to be God's. And so therefore, its name was called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of the whole earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth. So could you imagine you're working on a tower, and everybody knows everybody, and all of a sudden you hear some guy talking in some other kind of language. I mean, that's like, I can't even imagine that. So they're all freaking out, and so what happens, they all just disperse all over the earth, and I don't know if they got taught a new language through AI, I don't know. But anyway, God said we have to get there and confuse them on that. So that's really kind of what happened in Babylon. That's kind of the roots of the beginning. Now, Nimrod also was known to marry a gal by the name of Semiramis, that's it. And Nimrod was a hunter. Well, he went out hunting one day, apparently, and this is sort of mythology. We don't know how much of it's true. I think it's just mythology. But he went out hunting, and a wild boar gored him and killed him. And so he went to heaven, and he resurrected back into heaven as some kind of god. And so Semiramis was down on the planet grieving her husband, and so Nimrod shot a beam down into her stomach, and she became pregnant. Go figure. That's something you don't hear every day. So she supposedly became pregnant, and she didn't have, sex with the man. So she had a little baby called Tammuz. And Tammuz was the child of Nimrod, apparently, and of Semiramis. So Tammuz was like his father. He went, and I think he was probably out hunting. He got killed, and he rose again in 3 days. And this is where you get this whole idea of how Satan tries to counterfeit the virgin birth. This is before the virgin birth. But Satan knew that the virgin birth would happen, and he's already counterfeiting it through this mythology. Like in Egypt, it's I can't remember. They have a woman. I think it's Cupid and another one. But anyway, it's kind of crazy. So we see how Satan has trying to thwart the virgin birth by making up stories like this. So anyway, turning back to Revelation. And we see that the scarlet beasts had blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. Now the 7 heads, there's a lot of conjecture about that. But at this time, there had been 5 major empires. Egypt, Assyrian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, and then the Grecian Empire. And at that time, there was Rome, so that made 6. There were 7 heads, and the other empire, I believe, is the empire of the Antichrist. But so we see that there were 7 heads, and a lot of people think it's the 7 heads and the 7 hills of Rome. And so I think that could be entertained. I don't know. And it's for you guys that really want to study that. But anyway, the 7 heads, I believe, were we don't have empires today. We don't have any nation or country that's big enough to run and reign over the world. But Rome at that time was, of course, Rome goes down, and now we're going to see the 7th, which would be the empire of the beast, that really happens during the last 3.5 years of tribulation. I mean, it's all being made during the first 3.5 years. So anyway, and it had 10 horns, and a lot of people don't know what 10 horns mean. And there are some people that think that the European common market will have come together, and then the Antichrist will come out of that, and there will be 10 nations, and that could be. But as of late, they're thinking more that the Antichrist will divide the world into 10 sections, and there will be leaders over those sections. Now, I can't prove that, and some of this, again, is just you got to study it out and figure it out. But there will be 10 kings. There will be 10 sections of the world that are going to manifest itself during this time in the tribulation. And look at when the women, how she was clothed with purple and scarlet. Purple is always royalty. And then she was clothed with scarlet. Now, the Catholic Church, the popes and the cardinals all wear red or scarlet hats and sashes. And even back in the day, one of the popes made an edict like nobody could wear red or scarlet unless you were a pope or unless you were a cardinal. And so the church may have something, the Catholic Church may have something to do with, very well could be, I don't know. But the woman was clothed with purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand. So she, basically, that's speaking of wealth, that this empire will be very, very wealthy. And I think possibly the health and wealth prosperity doctrine is kind of feeding into this whole idea. This is going to be a very wealthy movement, and the false prophet could be the woman. But and so I hear the teaching of prosperity teaching and blab it, grab it, name it, claim it, and you can have anything you want. And I think that's very, very dangerous because, again, in the last days, this will be a very prosperous move, the religion of Babylon. And so I'm really concerned about some of that teaching and what some people think about it, because it's not of God for sure. But and she had a golden cup full of abominations. Now, basically, that means she's pouring out all her immorality and idolatry out on the nations at this time, and she's just pouring it out upon them. And the unclean things of her immorality. 5. And upon her forehead a name was written, Mystery Babylon. So we talked about that, mother of harlots. And then let's go to 6. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the witness of Jesus. And I saw her wonder, and I wondered greatly. And the angel said to me, why do you wonder? I just want to stop there for a second. The woman was drunk with the blood of the saints. You've heard people say that people get drunk on power. I mean, people that get power. I can remember Michael Jackson. I'm not, saying I'm a fan of his, but he said something one time. He said, when I'm on stage and I feel like I'm in control of the crowd, it's better than any drug or any sexual relationship I ever had, I guess, whatever. And I don't want to hurt the little kids' ears here, but that's what his comparison was, having that kind of power over people, and music can do that. And so I think the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, upon killing the saints, and drunk with just power. You ever seen people that just love power? And it's not a pretty sight. And the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. Now, he said after this, and when I saw her, I wonder greatly. And the angel said, why do you wonder? Today, when you look at everything going around, sometimes I think, I wonder greatly, what's going to happen? And how did we get to where we're at today? And then I'm reminded always of what the Bible, I've read this for years. And I've seen all this start to unfold. What I'm a little I wonder about sometimes is that how fast things are really moving, because we are almost in the throes of communism right now. And there's only just a few little things that we can do to push back to stay out of it. But one world government is happening before our very eyes. Socialism, Marxism, call it what you want. It's happening right now. And so I have people say, well, what is going on, Tom? How did this happen? And I just remember the angel says, why do you wonder? He's telling John, why do you wonder? Because God is telling you all this. He's in control. And that's what I really want to stress this morning. Wherever you're at with your walk with the Lord, and whatever you see the world and how it's unfolding, and it's a little bit, intimidating to you, know this. I've often said it, and I live by those verses, that no weapon formed against me shall prosper. That if God is for me, who could be against me? That when the enemy comes in like a flood, God will raise up a standard. Guys, that's where we're at. Take up the standard. We should be going, I read that in the Bible, and I get it. And that's what I'm seeing happening before my very eyes. And so why do you wonder? Why do we get scared? We shouldn't even, I think there's always that initial shock when you see something happen and we're moving a little closer to whatever, the one world government and one world money system. But think about it. Guys, Jesus said it was all going to happen. And I don't know if you know this, but Revelation isn't taught a lot around in a lot of churches. You don't hear it a whole lot. And so if you're here for the first time and you're hearing Revelation, you're probably thinking, what are these guys talking about? And so you just had to happen to step in at a time where we're going through this book. We want to go through the whole book of Revelation. But I believe God has ordained this book for us to look and go, why? We don't have to wonder, and we don't have to worry. But we can be thankful that my redemption is coming soon, and it's drawing nigh. Is anybody excited about that? Amen. I'm hoping it's not just me. Because, guys, and you need an exit plan. And if you don't know Jesus, you don't have an exit plan. And all your exit plan has to be is confess Jesus as Lord, confess your sins to the Lord God, and let Christ into your heart. And I'm not talking about a cheap, crossless gospel, but I'm thinking, you know what? I have my exit. I know how I'm going to end up. I won't be here during this time. But it is interesting to read what's going to happen in the last days, and it does help equip us to be more aware of what's happening in our world. But so I saw her and I wondered, and the angel said, "Why do you wonder?" Then the angel says, "I shall tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns." So he's going to explain partly what this is. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the abyss and go down to destruction. So basically 5 of them they're not any longer. Rome is there, but Rome's going to go down, and what's going to happen is Antichrist will come out of the abyss, and this 7th one will come out, and he will take control of the world. Then he will be destroyed in the lake of fire. Amen. So the beast you saw was not and is about to come out of the abyss and into destruction. And those who dwell on the earth will wonder, whose name has not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast, and that he was and is not and will come. So that's pretty clear, right? Yeah, got to kind of unravel a little bit. But he talked about the Lamb's book of life, the book of life. And here's what I gather about the book of life. That God has written everyone into the book of life. And in the moment you reject Christ, when you're confronted with him, or anybody that rejects him, you're erased out of the book of life. Now, I'm not going to be dogmatic about it. There's a lot of people who have different ideas about it. But so your name will be erased. But guess what? Your name could be put back in if you rejected Christ. I talked to someone, I won't mention his name, but he just said he was really struggling about, did I commit blasphemy of the Holy Spirit? I said, well, the very fact that you asked me that if you did it, that you haven't done it. And the fact is that the only way that you can blaspheme the Holy Spirit is to deny Jesus up until the day of your deathbed. Because that's rejection of Christ completely. That's what it is. It's not cursing him, and it's mainly. So anyway, we see now that this destruction and then and those who dwell in the whole earth will wonder, whose name has not been written in the book of life. Go to verse 9. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are the 7 mountains on which the woman sat. And again, I believe those are 7 empires that he's talking about. So, and a lot of people again say it's the 7 hills of Rome. And from my understanding, there's more than 7 hills at Rome. So you can't just isolate 7 and call that in this text. But it might be, I don't know. And they are 7 kings, 5 have fallen, and one is, and the other has not yet come. But when he comes, he must remain for a little while. And that would be when he comes for the duration of the 7-year tribulation. And the beast, which was and is not, is himself also an 8th, and he is one of the 7, and he goes out to destruction. The 10 horns which you saw are the 10 kings who have not received a kingdom, but they will receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. So I don't know when that actually happens, but it could happen during the first 3.5 years. But there are going to be 10 geographical locations that the earth will be divided up in. And again, is it nations? I don't know. Is it the European nation? I don't know for sure. But definitely there will be 10 kings, and they'll come under the jurisdiction of the beast. These have one purpose and give their power and authority to the beast. So everything is the beasts in their kingdom. These will wage war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, because he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are the called and chosen and faithful. I love that. It's good news when you hear all that. Just like, guess what? They'll wage war. You know who they're fighting against? Jesus. When it all comes down to it, in the Battle of Armageddon, we learn Christ is going to come down, and they're going to fight against Jesus. And you just can't win there. And I just love the victory. What we smell the victory here. And he says he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. Chosen and faithful. Are you chosen this morning? or do you know what that really means? We could probably talk about the doctrine of election, but guys, when God chose you at a time, he knew that you would come to him. I don't understand free will and sovereignty of God completely. I know they're both taught, but I can tell you this. When I was confronted with the claims of Christ, as an act of my will, I said, that's what I want. I want to receive Jesus. I want him to come into my heart. And I had to, by my will, decide that I will follow him and ask him to come into my heart. Is he sovereign? Yes. Does he hold me? Yes. And am I assured of heaven? According to John, it says, if you abide in me, my word abides in you. Ask whatever you wish, it shall be granted. And in the abiding part of a Christian guarantees our entrance into heaven. And I think there is something to be said about if you're not abiding. Does that mean you've lost your salvation? You can't lose your salvation, but you can leave it. And I'm really strong on that, but I believe really strongly that God's sovereignty is so much stronger than even our will at times. And I'm thankful for that. So I rest in the fact that he chose me. And I rest in the fact that others may choose him later down the road. And I'll do all I can to get him saved and come to Christ. And he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are the peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So this is all the world as you see it. It's everybody that's why I believe for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. The gospel is for everybody. And you have to receive it. But God he didn't just love the elect or the chosen. He loved the world. And he gave his son so that we can have a relationship with him. And the 10 horns which you saw and the beast, these will hate the harlot. Now this will make sense in a minute. And will make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh and burn her up with fire. That's pretty harsh. For God has put in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose and by giving their kingdom to the beast until the words of God should be fulfilled. And the woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth, which could be Babylon. But notice here, now what's happened is in the middle of the tribulation, if you remember, Antichrist will come into the temple and he will claim himself to be God and demand the worship, and it's called the abomination of desolation. So he'll come into the temple, demand worship, and at that point in time, the false prophet and the religion that had been the world religion is done with. And now the allegiance is just to the Antichrist. But all the rest of religion, everything is put away. So what he did is he used religion and commercial or spiritual Babylon to get where he was at, the abomination of desolation. And now he's taking over. So everything is under his jurisdiction now. He takes over. And he doesn't need the false prophet any longer. And as you see, he takes care of her. I think it's important for us to look at this, I believe, at this text and say, Lord, I see all this happening, and what does it mean to me? I believe it gives me rest. Believe it or not, you hear all that and you're going, man, that's kind of unsettling. No, it's not. I have rest that the Lord has taken me out of all this, and I have Christ in my heart. And I won't have to see any of this. And then it gives me, and I've said this so many times, I don't know how many times I could say it, that it's given me the heart for people to get saved. I don't want them to go through this. I mean, I don't know if you go to them and say, you know, the great harlot's coming through. I don't know how you witness to people, but guys, it ought to put a fire underneath your feet. It ought to give you a thanksgiving that God is just. And he's not looking at all what's happening to our world with all the sex slave trade market and the pedophilia. He's not looking at that with a blank eye. He sees what's going on. He will judge it. And I just think about those who are underneath the altar in Revelation. And they said, how long, Lord? How long will it be before you make retribution for all this that's happened? And I'm at the point with my walk with the Lord that I think sometimes, Lord, how long? How much longer can people be hurt and abortions happen and people killed? How much longer? And I rest in the fact that God knows the day, He knows the hour, He knows the millisecond when He's got to say, come on home, guys. And I believe it's soon. And even if it isn't, you know what? We're in a win-win, right? If it doesn't happen, we're all the better for knowing that we're longing to see Jesus. So, this morning, I don't know what you're going through, but are you longing to see Him? Are you really, really trusting Him for your life? And are you wondering, like, why, Lord, is this happening? Maybe something's happening in your life. And you're just going, why did this happen in my life, Lord? Why is this going on? I don't understand it. And it's like the angel says, why do you wonder? I'm in control. And that's the message that He wants to tell you. He's so in control that it's going to be all right. And whatever you're going through, He has the answer. I guarantee you, whatever you're going through is small in comparison to what we get to see heaven and see Jesus. We'll get up there and we'll go, man, I'd have done that 10 times over. Lord, thank you for taking me home. The church doesn't teach this much. It's not taught. And it seems like, I don't know why they don't teach on repentance and judgment. I don't fully understand it. But I do know this, that in the Bible it's taught. And we will do our best at Harvest Chapel to bring it across the best way I know how, to make you guys aware of where we're at. So do you believe that we're close? Yeah, I do too. And it's a win-win even if we weren't. So let's all stand.